somebody, yeah, that's a good idea. I used to have that in my old company. But if someone tries to say it's not mine, when I go get it, it's going to be a problem. Yeah, he still has me. My name's Matt Jarnis, the mold remediation guy for the group. And, you know, I made some notes to go over stuff. I forget a lot of the health hazards of mold, but I guess what I'm going to do today, talk a little bit about why mold can be a problem, and then talk about how we remediate it, and then talk about a special product that I use to help me remediate mold, which is chlorine dioxide, which some of you might be familiar with. But having mold in your home can lead to a variety of health problems. It's not going to cause cancer or anything like that, but it does have a lot of carcinogens in it that can cause a lot of problems to people. Respiratory issues, coughing, wheezing, shortness of breath, worsening of asthma symptoms. So if you're immunocompromised or have asthma, it's not a good idea to live in a home with elevated mold levels. An increased risk of respiratory infections, allergic reactions, immune system effects with increased susceptibility to infections, worsening of chronic illnesses. So I get a lot of people that call me up and they're like, look, we moved into this house 3 months ago. We had an inspection, but we didn't do mold testing. And every day I wake up with a headache and my nose runs until I get out of the house and my eyes are watery, you know. And then I go and the attic is littered with mold and their HVAC system is out there, so it's going through the whole house, you know. And a big question, we were actually talking about it last week, you guys were talking about how not all black mold is toxic, and that's very true. There's over 10,000 different types of black mold, and there's really only like 3 types that are toxic. But there's 100,000 different types of mold. Now, even a non-toxic mold still has mycotoxins, which can cause these problems. So it almost doesn't matter what type of mold is in the house. If the levels are elevated. Now, if the levels aren't elevated, it's fine because mold is on the table that you're eating on right now, you know? So the issue is, what are the levels? Are they elevated? Is there more mold in the house than there is outside? They used to say you want to have the same type of mold inside the house as outside of the house. And if you have one that's inside the house that isn't outside, you got a problem. I disagree with that because I've done testing before remediation where there's 6 different types of mold outside. And then 4 days later, there's 3 different types of mold outside. So where did the other 2 molds go? Well, it was windy while I was taking the test, so they didn't get picked up. So those 5 molds that were outside 3 days ago are in the home because they opened up the window. So it's, you know, with the testing, it's all we have to gauge what's going on inside the home, but it's not foolproof. It's a snapshot of what's going on.
Is there some independent agency that has a list of where the threshold should be? Because a lot of times I know with my business, you can make up whatever you want.
Right.
Say, oh, well, 20 parts per million is too much, but really the EPA is saying 5,000.
Right.
Is there...
The cutoff is usually 1,500 spores. So if it's over 1,500 spores, then it's considered to be elevated.
In total or on one species?
In one species,
Okay.
for each species. Good question. But that can also be, if you have 300 outside and 1,500 inside, then it's elevated. But if you had 6,000 outside, so it's kind of, how much sense it makes, I don't know, you know, but this is what we're dealing with. And to be an IEP, to be the guys that go in and do the inspections and do, you know, there's no license for that, just like there's no license for doing what I do. It's a certification. I could call myself an IEP if I wanted to start today, and I could be, you know,
What is that?
It's an indoor air something. It's the guy that comes in and writes the protocol for the remediation, you know? And a lot of these guys are guys that used to do what I did and then they retired and they just don't want to crawl in crawl spaces anymore, so they you know, they go out and they tell you how much mold is in the house and if it's good or bad, you know? So it's not always as simple as taking an air test, because you can also take an air test. I've done tests in a room off of a crawl space where the levels are elevated, but then there's a door with dormers on it going into another room in the basement, and there's no mold in that room. So it makes no sense. Then I've done ones where it's a 3-story house and there's mold in the basement, but there's also mold in the master bedroom upstairs, the same type of mold. So it's not a one size fits all, you know, if you got mold in one spot, it's all over the house, you know? And we'll get into that with chlorine dioxide in a little bit when I talk about that.
When you test the indoor and outdoor, you're looking for a species match? Is that what it is? Like if you have different
That's what I
inside,
don't
does that mean?
understand, indoor versus outdoor.
Yeah, so it's, you know, 15 years ago, that's what they were saying. You need to have the exact same types of mold inside as outside and no different. If there's anything different, then you got a problem. Nowadays, they've lessened the reins on that because they've started to develop indoor molds and outdoor molds. So you can have a mold in your home that isn't outside as long as it's considered to be an indoor mold. And the lab that we give the testing to will tell us what's an indoor mold and what's an outdoor mold, you know? So is it okay to have this mold in your house even though it's not outside? Yes, it is. The problem is that you got 3,000 spores, so it's elevated, so it has to be remediated. Even though it's
Remediate outdoor mold?
if it's inside and elevated, yes, because you don't want to have too much. So even a mold that's not toxic, like an indoor mold that's common to be found indoors, Penicillium aspergillus is the most common mold. But I just did a test in a guy's basement, and it's 6,000 spores, and there was like 125 outside. You know, so he's got to get that taken care of. He's been saying he's been having symptoms, and I'm well, this is why. You know, so it's not a toxic mold. It is an indoor mold that's very common, but his levels are extremely elevated. The reason it's extremely elevated is he had water in the basement, and he has one part of his basement that's covered with sheetrock, and it got wet, and there's mold growing. So that's what, you know. So a lot of people think to themselves, all right, I got mold growing here, I'm just gonna cut it out and I'm gonna spray some bleach on it, you know, or I'm just gonna spray some bleach on it because that kills it because it takes the stain away. So bleach will only kill mold on a hard surface. It won't kill it on a porous material. So I do a lot of bathrooms where people have surface mold growing on the sheetrock, on the ceiling and on the walls by the shower from the humidity in the shower, you know? And they'll be like, well, I cleaned it 3 times, but it keeps coming. I killed it 3 times, but it keeps coming back. Well, if you killed it one time, it won't grow back, you know? Yes.
You're talking about bathrooms. What about when you get it on the
grout?
The grout?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, how do you get it off? I mean,
So
how do you treat that?
with the grout, it's not too much to be worried about because it's such a small amount, you know, but if you really, the easiest way to get that taken care of would just be to take the grout out and put new grout in, you know. I could come over and put something on it that's going to kill it and take it away, which is, you know, probably a little bit more expensive than doing it, you know, getting it regrouted. But what I do is I put a sealant on it. It's an encapsulant. It's a clear coat encapsulant, so it won't grow back, you know. But I see that all the time. That's the only time with sheetrock, when it's in a bathroom like that you don't have to take the sheetrock out because it's only on the
I was
surface.
just gonna mention one thing, that I just had my bathrooms regrouted and resealed them. A company called Surgrout, I highly recommend it. If it's like an eyesore, if you're like, you know, I'm tired
No,
of
it's
it.
just that, you know, you scrub it and the
And I-
majority of it comes off and it's not from you, it's been there. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just,
No, I
it's bad enough we have well water that stains it.
Right.
No, what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's nothing to be worried about.
Fiberglass
So
enclosures.
the rule of thumb with mold is if it's under a foot, then really the homeowner can take care of it by themselves. That's what they teach us in class. I'm not fully on board with that because I've literally seen 6 inches of mold on sheetrock in someone's basement, and their levels in the basement will be 8,000, you know? So a lot of people think you just cut out the mold, you get rid of it, and the problem's done. But the issue is that we're actually trying to we have to clean the air. You know, the problem is that we're breathing the mold in. A lot of it is respiratory. So we're trying to remove an invisible dust, and that's where this comes in. So this is an air scrubber. So it has a HEPA filter in there, which is a high efficiency particulate air filter, and it actually will capture the mold spores. So it changes the air in the room 4 times per hour. So we let it run for 48 to 72 hours throughout the job. The first thing we do is plug these in. So when we stop working, we sporulate the mold. When you touch mold, it sporulates. When you remove sheetrock with mold on it, it sporulates, it becomes airborne. So this is gonna catch those. And then after we're done, we HEPA vacuum the whole room. We wipe down the whole room with an antimicrobial, because you can kill mold, but a dead mold spore will still produce mycotoxins, which can get you sick. So there's more to it than just, they used to say, you spray something on the mold, you vacuum, and then you fog the air with an antimicrobial, which kills the mold spores in the air, you know? And then everyone's failing their post-clearance test.
So if you got mold in your basement, most likely you got mold throughout the whole house.
You might, not always, but there's a good
And that would
possibility.
mean you'd have to scrub the whole house.
You can scrub the whole house. You can use chlorine dioxide, which is a lot less labor intensive, and that will disinfect.
Is that a
the
mist?
whole- It's a gas.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a gas. So I have it written down here because I'm bad with numbers. I'm dyslexic, but you know, chlorine dioxide was something. It's been in our drinking water. My dad's an environmental engineer. He does water treatment plants. And when I first started using chlorine dioxide in 2016, he's like, well, that's in our drinking water. And I was like, really? Because when I use it, I have to wear a respirator. You can't breathe that stuff
Yeah,
in.
but it's still hard.
Yeah, so but at a very small level, it's in our drinking water. But, so a mold spore, well, I can't find it, but a mold spore is about, it's a micron. It's a micron. You can see it on a microscope, but it's a micron. Chlorine dioxide gas molecule is 0.124 nanometers. So that means that over 1,000 of these gas molecules can fit inside a mold spore, and it literally explodes it. It oxidizes it and explodes the mold spore and actually removes it from the air. So this is a great concept because, you know, we used to do a full remediation where, you know, you HEPA vacuum, you treat the area, it's called a HEPA sandwich. So you have the affected area with the mold on it, you HEPA vacuum it, you treat it with an antimicrobial, you remove the stain or you scrub it off or you sand it off, then you encapsulate it with the mold resistant barrier, then you HEPA vacuum it again, so it's a HEPA sandwich, you know? Then you HEPA vacuum the whole room, then you wipe down the whole room, you fog the air, you let these run, and sometimes we're venting these out windows, so it puts all the mold outside. You know, so there's a process to it, and then you're still failing your post-test because you didn't get all the spores out. So sometimes you gotta run these for another 3 days, so you're losing time, you're losing money because now this isn't on another job, you know? Now you're renting equipment to do the job you have and you're losing money. So chlorine
Filter
dioxide,
every job?
there's a pre-filter which you change every job. The HEPA filter, I forget how many hours it lasts, but there's a light on the machine that tells you when you need to replace it. If you do an insurance job, they'll buy you a new HEPA filter so you can change it on those ones. Yeah,
With learning from Mark that the filters for HVAC systems aren't for us, it's for the machine. Is there something after you go through a whole system that an individual would keep in their house on a regular basis to keep the air a little
they
cleaner?
can get an air purifier.
Okay,
yeah, there's
alright.
a couple that I recommend.
Have them.
Yeah.
There's one that I recommend that's made specifically for mold. I mean, it does capture dust and allergens like that, but it literally breaks up mold spores, similar to what chlorine dioxide does.
That's the one you recommended to me, right?
Yeah, it ionizes them. So I've used those on jobs before too, and they do work real well. But the chlorine dioxide, Ralph, also works on smoke odor. So if you ever get a listing where someone smoked in the house, we go down, we wipe down the walls with the chlorine dioxide, and
That's
then we gas
something you
it.
need to talk about.
That's what I'm
important.
doing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing.
That's important because you see how we just learned something. That's a new tip.
Absolutely.
That's a new tip.
Yeah, it works real good. It's a 24-hour process. Sometimes with the smoke, you have to do it a second time, you know, but they have to be out of the home for 24 hours. You open up a window, you introduce air into the atmosphere, and it gets rid of the chlorine dioxide. There will be a pool smell for a few days, but it's totally safe to breathe in.
It all sounds very labor intensive. I would think that, okay, you got a mold issue, you run the machines and spray or something, but it sounds much more labor intensive than that.
It is.
If you have an issue.
HEPA vacuuming is my least favorite thing in the world, you know? I don't mind doing a wall and a ceiling, but when you're talking about an unfinished basement with the joists, yeah, that stinks. But I'll be honest,
Mine got asbestos, like, that's not wrapped.
yeah, you gotta vacuum that whole thing, but I'll be honest with you, I've done tests myself. When I first started using chlorine dioxide, you know, an attic can be real difficult to HEPA vacuum. So you put a 25, 50-foot hose on your vacuum, and you're trying to vacuum sheathing and joists, and there's nails from the roof going in, and you're cutting your hands up even if you have gloves, and you can't get to every area, right? So one time I said to myself, I know I'm only vacuuming about 50% of this attic, right? So I got a 50% chance. And this woman wasn't doing air testing, because air testing is expensive. So to do extensive air testing pre and post remediation, you could be adding $1,500 to the bill. And they're already paying, let's say, a $3,000 bill, so they don't want to do it, right? So you just got to go in there and do the best you can without really knowing how you did. So I said to myself, I'm going to not vacuum, and I'm going to use chlorine dioxide in this attic and do a post test. And she had cladosporium was the type of mold, which isn't a toxic mold, but she had 63,000. She had someone else do the pre-testing. 63,000 spores, so a lot of spores. And there was only about 5 spots in the attic with mold in it from leaks, you know? So we treated those. I sprayed the whole attic with an antimicrobial. I fogged. I left my air scrubber for 3 days. And I went in and I sealed off her vents and her fan. And I ran the chlorine dioxide for 24 hours. Went and did a test on my own, which I paid for because I was just curious. And we brought it down to 1,300 without vacuuming. You know, so the chlorine dioxide is really, not a lot of people even know about it. I learned about it from a guy that really, he helped me when I was first getting started with mold back in like 2013. He's from Colorado, and he called me up one day in 2015 and said, listen man, we got this new product that we're selling. I'm gonna send you some, you gotta try it. And you know, and I used it, and it literally, I mean, it just depletes the mold in the air. You know, it's really a great product. And a lot of people don't know about it. A lot of people are scared of it because they got to leave the house for 24 hours and you can't breathe it in, so they don't want you to use it. But it's a very handy tool. It cuts down on the labor. I mean, you still vacuum when you're using it, but that one, I said to myself, because what was I going to do if I didn't get the levels down? I would have had to vacuum, run the air scrubber for longer, but I was willing to do it for my own knowledge. And the chlorine dioxide did bring the levels down from 63,000 to 30.
temporary fix?
No, it was always a temporary fix. Mold is going to grow back. You know what I mean? If you get water or you have elevated relative humidity, it's going to grow back. The only time I give a warranty is on those bathroom jobs. And that can be voided if they don't get the fan put in, or if they don't get like sometimes I tell them you need to get a small dehumidifier, which you got to empty every day, you know what I mean? But if they call me back 8 months later, which has never happened because the product that I use is real good, but if they did and their dehumidifier is full and it's not working, then that voids the warranty. I'll probably treat it again for free because, you know, I believe
You want
in
relationships.
Yeah, I believe in good service. But yeah, you can't really give a warranty on mold because
You need to fix the reason why it.
yeah, you need to fix the source, and then, you know, the common misconception is that you just spray something on it and you kill it and it's good. But really, we're trying to remove an invisible dust from the air and from the surfaces. Did you have a question?
Yeah, when you were saying about removing the smokes type of, like if a
Yes.
smoker lived in a residence before, I remember I've had an apartment before where anytime I showered, the wall would like leak, like
Yeah,
a
get
yellowish
moist,
kind of
yeah.
like that type of thing and stuff like that. So so the process on that is both a chemical thing and a fanning thing that you're doing on that?
So on those ones, I'll leave the air scrubber for a couple days, you know what I mean? But basically, I HEPA vacuum it, I treat it with a product which kills it, I remove the staining, and I put a clear coat encapsulant on it. It's a zinc barrier, so if mold tries to grow back, it's going to stop that from happening. But mold can still grow on top of the encapsulants. Matter of fact, I just looked at one the other day where they had mold in the basement in Princeton, and half of her basement was painted white. So the previous homeowners had mold, it was remediated, they used a white encapsulant, and there was literally mold growing on top of the encapsulant, but not on the other half of the basement. And she was like, you know, why is this happening? And I have no answer for that, you know, except maybe the wood couldn't breathe because of the encapsulant, so it was growing on top of it. You know, the companies that make these products, they give you a 5 or a 10-year warranty, so this might have been 20 years old, and it's just not working anymore. But it was interesting that it was only on the area where they had encapsulant, and it was not on the other side. That led me to, I said the only thing is on this side of the house, for whatever reason, you have a different airflow issue than you have over here, because obviously there was mold here whenever this was done, but not on this side, and now it's happening again. So mold's a formidable opponent, you know what I mean? It's not as easy as some people think it is, and there's a lot to it.
Do you get involved in any lead?
I don't do lead and I don't do asbestos because I don't want the state of New Jersey in my business at all. And they're terrible. You know, I have a friend that does
I've had
asbestos.
experience with
He
that.
does
I'm certified
asbestos
for
in
lead
PA,
at one point.
and he won't get certified in Jersey. I've thought about it because it's pretty much the same procedure. You know, you make a containment, you remove it, you vacuum it.
I went through the whole course where they teach you.
Yeah. But the state is crazy, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, well, that's why I got out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I heard
Yeah.
somebody say the other day, a plumber, it's like, if you can pass code in Jersey, you can pass code anywhere.
Yeah, well, it's like, you said.
Yeah.
I had a big job to do, and it had to be tested for lead. You
Yeah.
had to do all the process for the lead remediation, so I had to get certified. And for me to have somebody come in and do it, it was too much money.
A lot of money.
Yeah, I did it myself, but I would never do it again.
Yeah.
So Dave here just went through a fire,
Mhm.
right, inside his house and outside. And obviously Chuck came over and did the repairs. There's smoke damage.
Mhm.
If you, is it economic, like, I don't know what you did, Chuck, to get rid of the
Well,
smoke damage, but
we created
would you do
everything. I don't
Yeah,
know
we
if
could take care of the
trapped any
smoke. We could take care of the smell. You know, if there was a smoke odor in the home
There
from
was
that,
a heavy smoke.
we could
odor.
take care of that.
We got rid of it just by painting.
by covering it up, yeah. Now that can come back, that can eventually come through the paint, you know what I mean, over time, doesn't mean it's gonna happen. But what it does, the chlorine dioxide molecule is so small that it gets inside the odor causing molecule and denatures it.
They also had people come in and
Put scrubbers in,
things, and they
yeah,
left them in there for days
yeah.
before we even started tearing out sheetrock.
Yeah, a lot of, they might have used the ozone machine, which also helps with odor. You can't be in the house while you're running
Even
that
after they
either.
took the machines out, we could still smell it until after
Till you
we
paint it.
sheetrocked and painted.
Yeah.
And then the smell went away,
Yeah, yeah.
thankfully.
Yeah, the chlorine dioxide, you know, it can be, it's not cheap to get it done, but you don't have to remove the sheetrock, put new sheetrock up, so it's a time thing too. If you're trying to sell a house, you know, it's gonna take a week and a half to get the sheetrock removed and put up and then spackled 3 times and sanded and painted, so you don't have to do all that, you know what I mean? You can just use the chlorine dioxide. But to give you an idea, it comes out to about $1.25, $1.50 a square foot to get that chlorine dioxide treatment. Now, if I'm doing a mold job, it might be a little cheaper than that, you know, because I'm making up for it on the remediation portion. But the reason I like it in chlorine dioxide on a mold job is if you have mold in the basement and you have mold in one room, mold in the air upstairs from the basement, you know, it could be in the 2 rooms adjacent to that room. So if you're gonna pay me to vacuum those rooms, wipe those rooms down, leave 4 pieces of equipment, you know what I mean? And then we don't even know what's going on upstairs. So it's a lot more economical to just use chlorine dioxide on the whole house and just know that we're removing the mold spores in the air in the whole house. And not only that, it denatures allergens, so if you're having allergy issues, which might not be from the mold, they might just be regular allergens, it's gonna denature those as well.
What about cars?
You can use it in cars, yeah. Yeah, I've done a couple for people that have bought cars. I haven't done them in a long time, and they smell like cigarette smoke. So they have a little 20 gram or 10 gram thing, and you put it in the cup holder. You let the car run for 20 minutes without the air conditioner on. Then you go in and turn the air conditioner on so it goes through the whole system. And you only let it run for an hour, and it works real good. But you can buy those on Amazon and do them yourself. They're like $40, you know. But I think you got to buy a respirator. That's so.
A respirator, how about if you don't drive the car for 2 days?
Well, when you go in to turn the air conditioner on, you don't want to go in there
Hold your breath.
Yeah, you can hold your breath. Yeah,
I used them.
It's like
yeah,
mushroom.
they work real good. It's a cool
I
product.
had to do it 3 times in my
Yeah.
father's car, but
Yeah, sometimes you got to do it a couple times, but it does work.
So some of these solutions sound pretty intense. I think is similar to like what Chuck said with the wanting to be in there for like 72 hours and
Yeah.
not having the residents live there. Are there solutions that you have that don't put a person out of the place that they're living? Because I feel like that's also a difficulty.
Yeah, so the chlorine dioxide is the only time they have to leave. Now, I've done mold remediations where people are home the whole time. The stain remover that we use, I like the stain remover and the clear coat encapsulant because when you sell the home and you got white paint on a portion of your attic, now you got to tell that you had mold when you're selling a house, but it looks like you're trying to cover something up. you know? So to keep the wood its natural color and make it look consistent with the rest of the roof or the rest of the basement, I like the clear coat. In order to use the clear coat, you gotta try to remove the staining, which you can't always do. Some staining is permanent, you know what I mean? But that stain remover, I gotta wear a respirator when I'm using that too, so you don't really wanna be in the house while that's going on. So sometimes I'll tell people, just leave the house for like 5 to 10 hours during the day while I'm working, and then we'll leave the windows open, shut the AC off, which
What was
you
the
don't
product you
wanna.
guys were pushing, not you in particular, but the mold guys were pushing probably about 10, 15 years ago, X17, X22 or something? They used to spray on, you could just watch the mold disappear.
Yeah.
Is that still being used?
I haven't seen it in a while. Now there's like RMR 65 or something like that. That's a real good product. But it doesn't kill the mold or anything like that. It just removes the staining. What I do for people, because you can't always remove the staining. Sometimes you can get 80% of it out. It looks much better, but there's still some staining. So I'll do a swab test and send it out to a lab and ensure them that it's dead before I encapsulate it. You know what I mean? That's something that I do on every job. Not a lot of people do that, but I want them to have proof when they go to sell the house that it was remediated and killed. It doesn't mean that in 5 years, if they swab that place, they're not gonna have mold on it. They probably will, you know? But they're gonna have mold on it unforeseen with no stain too, because that's how mold grows.
And that stuff
you know?
used to be pretty cool because you'd have aged plywood that was oxidized for 30
Yeah.
years old. They would come in, spray that stuff all over, and it looks like, oh, they just had their house resheet.
Brand new.
It looked like brand. It would
Yeah.
just take all the oxidation and everything. But
Yeah.
like you said, it may not have penetrated well and killed
Yeah.
everything, but it took the stain away.
What you
Yeah.
gotta do is you gotta look at it about 3 months later. You know what I mean? 4 months later and say, oh, it's growing right back. You know what I mean?
Well, that's why you put the encapsulant on it. So if it does try to grow back, that kills it, you know?
That's a spray you put on.
That's a spray. Actually, I found a product about a year ago, which is amazing. It kills the mold, it removes the stain, and as it evaporates, it leaves a zinc barrier on there. So it's 3 in 1. So it saves me on labor. So when I use that, I can price the jobs accordingly. Instead of having to spray it 3 times, just spraying it once, you know?
What do you do about like furniture and stuff? I mean,
When you're spraying,
yeah, because you can't get sometimes behind all the furniture,
so
so you're missing some areas, kind of.
well, if they have mold, let's say on a wall behind the couch, it's probably sheetrocked, and that has to come out anyway. So you're moving the furniture to get that.
You're doing a lot of sheetrock work.
A good amount, yeah. Sheetrock always got to come out unless it's like the bathroom, like I was telling you about, where it's just a surface mold. But 9 times out of 10, sheetrock has to be removed. So I just did a basement where I had to move everything to the middle of the room, put plastic over everything, and I cut out half of the basement 2 feet up around the whole
Now,
perimeter.
who's doing
I
that
do
work?
that myself.
I'm taking it out. I'm not putting it back though. That's where you come in. Yeah.
Now, do you treat that furniture that's in the center of the room? Because that has mold on it too.
So what I do is, if they're paying for it, I'll HEPA vacuum everything, right? Another way to do it is use chlorine dioxide and just it kills everything on everything.
But does the chlorine dioxide fade the fabric?
Only if I sprayed on it or if the fabric is wet. That's a good question. So if you take a shower in the morning and I come and use chlorine dioxide, it's going to turn those towels bleached. But if you put them in a plastic bag before I come, they're safe. So as long as it's not wet, it won't kill it. It won't change the color.
How about hydrogen peroxide?
I don't like it. I really don't like it because it doesn't do anything for the stain. It does kill it, but you might as well just use an antimicrobial to kill it than use a stain remover. Yeah, I've never been a fan of it. People love it, but
I mean, it kills the stuff.
you work,
that doesn't remove the stain.
you got to scrub it. You work your ass off, and then it looks the same. You know? Yeah.
All right.